My name is Eleanor, and at 68 years old, I never imagined I'd be homeless. After losing Frank, my husband of 45 years, my son Michael convinced me to sell my house and move in with his family. For a while, everything seemed perfect until tensions with my daughter-in-law Stephanie grew unbearable. Then came those devastating words from my own son's mouth. "We don't have room for you anymore." What happened next changed everything. Before I continue this painful story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe to hear how I took back what was rightfully mine. Frank and I built our life together brick by brick. We met in college when we were both 19, married at 22, and spent the next 45 years building a beautiful life together. Our modest 3-bedroom craftsman-style home on Maple Street wasn't fancy by today's standards, but it was our dream home. Frank, with his carpentry skills, had customized every inch of that house. The kitchen cabinets he built by hand, the backyard garden where we grew tomatoes every summer, the porch swing where we'd sit and watch the sunset. Every corner held decades of memories. When Frank died from a sudden heart attack 5 years ago, the silence in that house became deafening. I'd wake up reaching for him in the middle of the night, only to touch cold, empty sheets. The worst part was dinner time. After 45 years of cooking for two, I couldn't adjust to cooking for one. I'd make full meals out of habit, then realize my mistake when I set the table. Those first few months were the darkest of my life. Financially, we were comfortable but not wealthy. Frank had a decent pension from his 30 years at the manufacturing plant, and I had built a modest real estate business that provided supplemental income. We had savings, no mortgage, and I could have continued living in our home indefinitely. Money wasn't the issue, loneliness was. It was during one of my low points, about 6 months after Frank's passing, when Michael first suggested I sell the house and move in with him, Stephanie, and my grandchildren, Emily and Jacob. "Mom, that house is too big for you to maintain alone," Michael said during one of his weekend visits. "You'd be doing us a favor too. With the kids getting older, they could use more space, and you could help with Emily and Jacob after school while we're working." I was hesitant. "This is the home your father and I built together. Every inch of it has memories." Michael put his arm around me. "I know, Mom. But Dad would want you to be happy, not rattling around this big house by yourself. Think about it. You'd get to see Emily and Jacob every day instead of just on weekends." The thought of daily hugs from my grandchildren was tempting. Emily was 11 then, Jacob just 9, both at ages where they still enjoyed spending time with their grandmother. "What does Stephanie think about this?" I asked cautiously. My relationship with my daughter-in-law had always been cordial, if not particularly warm. "It was her idea," Michael assured me, though something in his expression made me wonder. Over the next few weeks, Michael continued his campaign. "The housing market is hot right now, Mom. You could sell for a great price and have a nice nest egg for your future." After 3 months of gentle but persistent persuasion, I finally agreed. The real estate agent, Deborah, was a former colleague of mine and priced my home above what I expected. It sold within a week to a young family, which gave me some comfort. At least a new family would create their own memories there. I netted just over $320,000 from the sale after paying off some small debts. It was a substantial sum, and I felt financially secure. Michael suggested I put most of it into investments but keep some liquid for emergencies. The day I moved out of my home of 40 years, I sat on the porch swing one last time and wept. Frank and I had brought baby Michael home to this house. We'd celebrated birthdays, Christmases, and anniversaries within these walls. Leaving felt like abandoning Frank all over again. Nevertheless, I packed up my life into boxes, keeping only what would fit in my new space. The guest bedroom and bathroom in Michael and Stephanie's suburban 2-story home. I donated most of my furniture to a women's shelter and kept only a few precious pieces. Frank's recliner, our wedding photo albums, and some family heirlooms. My grandchildren were ecstatic when I moved in. Emily showed me her collection of volleyball trophies, and Jacob wanted me to meet every character in his video games. Those first few days were busy with unpacking and settling in. Stephanie had cleared 3 drawers in the guest room dresser and half the closet for my things. The rest of my belongings went into storage in their basement. "Make yourself at home, Eleanor," Stephanie said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Our home is your home now. I should have paid more attention to the subtle emphasis on whose home it really was. The first month living with Michael's family was pleasant enough. I tried to be helpful without overstepping. I'd prepare dinner when Stephanie worked late at her interior design studio. I'd help the kids with homework and drive them to after-school activities. I felt useful and part of the family. But by the second month, small irritations began to surface. One evening I was cooking spaghetti and meatballs, Frank's old recipe that the grandkids loved. Stephanie came home, took one look at the kitchen and sighed loudly. "Eleanor, I wish you'd asked before using so many pots. We're trying to minimize our water usage, and now we'll have all these dishes to wash." "I'm sorry," I said, confused. "I always clean up after myself." "It's not just about cleaning," she said. "It's about consideration. And we're trying to cut back on carbs." Michael's cholesterol was high at his last checkup. This was news to me. Michael never mentioned anything about his cholesterol. "Well, he wouldn't want to worry you," she replied, reaching past me to turn down the heat on the sauce. "I'll fix a salad to go with this." The grandkids devoured the spaghetti that night, and Michael had 2 helpings, high cholesterol concerns apparently forgotten. But the message was clear. This was Stephanie's kitchen, not mine. Similar incidents multiplied. I'd fold laundry only to be told I wasn't doing it right. "We fold Jacob's t-shirts in thirds, not halves," Stephanie would say, redoing my work. The bathroom became another point of contention. "Grandma, you use too much hot water," Emily informed me one morning. "Mom says our water bill is through the roof this month." I offered to contribute financially. "I'd be happy to pay a portion of the utilities and groceries," I told Michael one evening when we had a rare moment alone. "Don't be ridiculous, Mom," he said. "You're family, not a tenant. Besides, we're doing fine." But the next day, Stephanie mentioned casually how much private school tuition had increased. Nearly $24,000 per child now. "It's such a strain on our budget." The hint was obvious, but when I offered to help with the grandchildren's education, Michael again refused. Yet a week later, they purchased a new SUV that must have cost at least $60,000. My relationship with my grandchildren began to change too. Initially, they'd seek me out after school, eager to tell me about their day. But increasingly, Stephanie intercepted these moments. "Emily needs to practice piano right now," she'd say, or "Jacob has a science project due." Soon, the children stopped coming to my room except when their parents weren't home. Once I overheard Stephanie telling Emily, "Grandma needs her rest. She's getting older, and we shouldn't bother her too much." I was 68, not 98. I had more energy than many people decades younger. Being treated like a fragile antique was insulting. Michael remained oblivious to these tensions or chose to ignore them. He left for work at 7 each morning and often didn't return until after 8 at night. On weekends, he'd escape to golf with his colleagues. When I tried to talk to him, something always interrupted us. A phone call, Stephanie needing his help, or the children requiring attention. The final straw came when I overheard Stephanie talking on the phone to her friend Kimberly. I was reading in the backyard when Stephanie stepped onto the patio, unaware of my presence around the corner. "It's becoming impossible," she was saying. "She's always there, watching everything we do." Michael won't discuss senior living options because he feels guilty, but honestly, we need our space back. I've already measured her room for my Peloton and workout equipment. It would make the perfect home gym. I sat frozen, the book forgotten in my lap, as Stephanie continued. "I know she sold her house and has nowhere else to go, but that's not our problem. We never promised this would be permanent. Eleanor's Social Security and the money from her house should be enough for a nice retirement community." The realization that they saw me as a burden, a problem to be solved rather than family to be cherished, was devastating. What hurt even more was understanding that I had no real home anymore. I had sold my house, the home Frank and I had lovingly built together, and now I was unwelcome in the very place I'd been persuaded to move to. That night I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, wondering how things had gone so wrong. Had I been naive to believe I could integrate seamlessly into my son's established household? Or had there been a plan all along to access my house money, and then discard me when I became inconvenient? I felt like an unwanted guest, tiptoeing around someone else's home, apologizing for my very existence. My self-esteem, already fragile after losing Frank, crumbled further with each passing day. I began to wonder if Stephanie was right. Maybe at 68 I should just accept being put out to pasture. What I didn't realize then was that the worst was yet to come, but so was my awakening. The breaking point came during a dinner party Stephanie organized for her colleagues from the design studio. She had been planning it for weeks, transforming the dining room with elaborate centerpieces and mood lighting. I offered to help but was assigned the simple task of refilling water glasses. Clearly a role meant to keep me occupied but out of the way. During dinner, one of Stephanie's colleagues, a kind woman named Darlene, engaged me in conversation about my former real estate career. Eleanor, Stephanie mentioned you were quite successful in real estate. I'm actually looking to invest in some rental properties. Would you mind sharing some insights? Before I could answer, Stephanie cut in. Oh, Mom's experience is from a different era. The market has completely changed since then. Actually, I said, feeling a rare spark of confidence, certain principles of real estate investment remain constant regardless of market trends. Location and property condition will always matter. For the next 15 minutes, Darlene and several other guests asked me questions about real estate, genuinely interested in my experience. For the first time in months, I felt valued and respected. Then Stephanie stood to clear the appetizer plates. Mom gets confused about current property values, she said with a patronizing smile. She still thinks houses cost what they did 20 years ago. The table felt uncomfortably silent. I felt my face flush with embarrassment and anger. Actually, I said quietly, I sold my home just 7 months ago for over $300,000. I'm quite aware of current market values. Stephanie's smile froze. Let me get the main course, she said, disappearing into the kitchen. Later that evening, after the guests had left, I overheard Michael and Stephanie arguing in their bedroom. She humiliated me in front of my colleagues, Stephanie hissed, making it sound like we took her money. Lower your voice, Michael responded. She didn't say anything about money. She didn't have to. The way she emphasized selling her house. Everyone probably thinks we forced her out of her home for her money. That's not what happened and you know it, Michael said, but his voice lacked conviction. This isn't working, Michael. I can't have her undermining me in my own home. It's time for her to find somewhere else to live. Their voices dropped, and I couldn't hear Michael's response. I returned to my room, heart pounding, knowing something fundamental had shifted. The next morning, Michael knocked on my door just after Stephanie left to take the children to school. His face was haggard, as if he hadn't slept. Mom, can we talk? We sat at the kitchen table, mugs of coffee between us. Michael couldn't meet my eyes. Mom, Stephanie and I have been talking, and this arrangement isn't working out as we'd hoped. My hands tightened around my mug. I see. It's not that we don't want you here, he continued, still not looking at me. It's just that the house feels crowded. The kids are getting older and need more space. Emily's almost a teenager and needs privacy. I understand, I said, though I didn't. My small bedroom and bathroom took up minimal space in their 3,500 square foot home. Michael finally looked up, his expression a mixture of guilt and resolution. We don't have room for you anymore, Mom. The words hit me like a physical blow. Don't have room. Not we're concerned about your happiness, or we think you might be more comfortable elsewhere. Simply, we don't have room. As if I were a discarded piece of furniture taking up too much space. I see, I repeated, struggling to maintain my composure. There's a really nice retirement community on the north side of town, Michael continued, pulling out a glossy brochure. Stephanie and I checked it out last week. They have activities, dining facilities, medical staff on call. Last week, they had been planning this, visiting places without telling me, deciding my future without my input. How much does it cost? I asked. Michael shifted uncomfortably. It's about $3,500 per month for the basic package, but it includes meals and utilities. $42,000 a year. My Social Security was just over $2,100 monthly. The math didn't work. I can't afford that, Michael. Well, you have the money from the house, he said quickly. That should last quite a while. And there it was. My suspicion confirmed. They had encouraged me to sell my house, Not primarily out of concern for my well-being, but to gain access to my money. Money that had apparently already been mentally allocated to pay for my warehousing in a retirement facility. What happened to the money I gave you for home improvements? I asked. After selling my house, I had given Michael $50,000 to build an addition that never materialized. Michael had the grace to look ashamed. We had some unexpected expenses. Emily's braces, Jacob's summer camp, the trip to Europe, the luxury European vacation they had taken last summer while I stayed home with the dog, the new kitchen remodel that had nothing to do with creating space for me, the SUV, all funded by my house money. How soon do you need me to leave? I asked, my voice surprisingly steady. Michael looked relieved that I wasn't arguing. We've put down a deposit to hold a unit starting next month. But if you need more time. I don't, I said, standing up. I'll be gone by tomorrow. Mom, don't be dramatic. You don't have to leave immediately. We can help you pack and move properly. I'll manage, I said, walking out of the kitchen. In my room, I closed the door and finally allowed the tears to come. Not just tears of hurt and betrayal, but tears of anger at Michael, at Stephanie, and at myself for being so naive. I spent the next few hours quietly packing essential items into 2 suitcases. Clothes, medications, important documents, and a few precious photos. The rest would have to wait. I couldn't bear to be in that house a moment longer than necessary. When I heard Michael leave for work, I called a taxi. I left a brief note saying I would arrange to collect my remaining belongings later. Then I walked out the door with no clear destination, just the overwhelming need to escape the suffocating sense of rejection. I sat in a park for almost an hour, watching children play while trying to process what had happened. My own son had effectively evicted me from what was supposed to be my new home. The home I had sacrificed my house of 40 years for. The home I had contributed significantly to financially. And now at 68, I was homeless. With nowhere else to go, I called Martha, my friend of over 30 years. Martha and I had met when our sons played Little League together, and our friendship had endured through marriages, children, grandchildren, and Martha's divorce. When Frank died, Martha had been my rock. Eleanor? What's wrong? You sound terrible, Martha said when she answered. My voice broke as I explained what had happened. Martha's response was immediate and fierce. Those ungrateful, conniving. I'm coming to get you. Where are you? 20 minutes later, Martha pulled up in her sedan. She took one look at me sitting on the park bench with my suitcases and enveloped me in a hug. You're staying with me, she declared. No arguments. Martha's condo had a comfortable guest room that she insisted was mine, for as long as you need it. That night, over a glass of wine, I poured out the whole story. The pressure to sell my house, the growing tensions with Stephanie, and finally Michael's betrayal. I feel so stupid, I confessed. I should have seen this coming. Stop that right now, Martha said firmly. You trusted your son. That's not stupid. That's what family is supposed to do. Michael and that wife of his are the ones who should be ashamed. Despite Martha's support, depression settled over me like a heavy blanket in the following days. I barely ate, rarely left the guest room, and spent hours staring at the ceiling, replaying every interaction, wondering where I had gone wrong. You need to call your brother, Martha urged after a week of watching me spiral downward. Robert should know what's happening. My brother Robert lived in Arizona. We spoke regularly but hadn't seen each other in person since Frank's funeral. I was reluctant to burden him with my problems, but Martha insisted. Robert was outraged when I told him what had happened. Michael did what? That's unconscionable. You gave up your home to move in with them. I feel so foolish, I admitted. At my age, I should have known better. Eleanor, listen to me, Robert said, his voice softening. You're not foolish. You're kind and trusting, and Michael took advantage of that. But here's what I don't understand. Didn't you co-sign when they bought that house? The question caught me off guard. Yes, but that was years ago. Michael couldn't qualify for the mortgage on his own back then. Is your name still on the deed? Robert pressed. I think so. We never did the paperwork to remove it. And didn't you give them the down payment as well? The memories came flooding back. Michael and Stephanie had been married only 2 years, both fresh in their careers with modest salaries. They'd found the house of their dreams but couldn't afford the 20% down payment needed to avoid private mortgage insurance. I had given them $60,000. Money from an inheritance when my mother passed away. Yes, I said slowly. I gave them the down payment. It was a gift. Was it? Robert asked. Or was it an investment? Did you ever discuss that? I hadn't considered this perspective before. At the time, I'd simply wanted to help my son and his new wife establish their home. But Robert's questions planted a seed in my mind. Eleanor, Robert continued, I think you need to speak with a lawyer. If your name is on the deed, and you provided the down payment, you may have more rights than you realize. The next day, with Martha's encouragement, I called Raymond, a lawyer who had been friends with Frank. Raymond agreed to see me immediately. In his office, I explained the situation, showing him what documentation I had, old bank statements showing the transfer of the down payment, tax records that indicated I was still listed as a co-owner of the property. Raymond listened attentively, then pulled up property records on his computer. Eleanor, according to this, you own 75% of that house. I stared at him in disbelief. That can't be right. It's Michael and Stephanie's house. Not according to the legal documents, Raymond said, turning his monitor so I could see. When you co-signed and provided the down payment, the ownership was split 75/25 in your favor. There's never been any transfer of ownership filed to change that. My mind reeled with this information. But they've been making the mortgage payments for years, which would entitle them to some equity certainly. But legally, you still own the majority share of that house. And there's more, Raymond continued, reviewing additional documents. According to these records, you contributed $50,000 7 months ago for home improvements, correct? Yes, for an addition that was never built. And previously you paid $30,000 for a new roof and HVAC system 3 years ago? I nodded, remembering how the old air conditioning had failed during a heat wave, and Michael and Stephanie hadn't had the funds to replace it. Eleanor, Raymond said gently, you haven't just been contributing to that household as a family member. You've been making significant financial investments in the property. Investments that were apparently misrepresented to you in terms of their purpose. For the first time since Michael's devastating words, I felt a glimmer of power return. I wasn't just a discarded mother. I was a legal owner with rights. What are my options? I asked. Raymond outlined several possibilities. I could demand to be bought out at fair market value. I could assert my right to live in the property I legally co-owned. Or, most dramatically, I could force a sale of the property and divide the proceeds according to legal ownership. Take some time to think about what you want, Raymond advised. This isn't just a legal decision. It's an emotional one too. But know that you have options, Eleanor. You're not powerless here. As I left Raymond's office, I stood taller than I had in months. The fog of depression and self-pity was lifting, replaced by a clarity and resolve I hadn't felt since before Frank died. I wasn't a victim. I was a woman who had been wronged but had the means to right that wrong. Martha noticed the change as soon as I walked through her door. Something's different, she observed. You look like the Eleanor I remember. I am, I replied with newfound confidence. And Michael and Stephanie are about to remember who I am too. Over the next 3 days, Raymond and I developed a comprehensive strategy. We gathered all documentation of my financial contributions to Michael and Stephanie's home. The initial down payment, the roof and HVAC replacement, the recent $50,000 that was supposed to be for an addition, and countless smaller contributions over the years for property taxes, homeowners insurance, and repairs. In total, beyond the 75% legal ownership, I had contributed over $150,000 to a home I was now told I didn't have room in. The way I see it, Raymond said during our final planning meeting, you have every right to assert your ownership. This isn't just about the money, Eleanor. It's about respect and acknowledgement of your contributions. Martha, who had become my unofficial counselor through this process, asked the important question. What do you want out of this, Eleanor? Do you want the money, the house, or do you want your relationship with Michael? It was a profound question. What did I want? Revenge would be easy but hollow. Money would provide security but wouldn't heal the emotional wounds. And my relationship with Michael. Could that even be salvaged after such a betrayal? I want justice, I finally answered. I want Michael and Stephanie to understand the consequences of their actions. But I also want a relationship with my grandchildren, and hopefully eventually with Michael too. With that clarity, Raymond finalized our approach. We would confront Michael and Stephanie with the legal reality of the situation and offer them two options. Either buy me out at fair market value for my 75% ownership plus my additional investments, or I would exercise my right as majority owner to make decisions about the property, including who lived there. Are you ready for this? Raymond asked on the morning we planned to confront them. It's likely to get emotional. I've been disrespected, manipulated, and discarded, I replied with newfound strength. I'm more than ready. We arrived at Michael and Stephanie's house, my house, legally speaking, unannounced on a Saturday morning. I knew they'd all be home. Raymond suggested I use my key to enter. A small but important assertion of my rights, but I chose to ring the doorbell instead. This wasn't about petty power moves. It was about reclaiming my dignity. Michael opened the door, his expression shifting from surprise to wariness when he saw Raymond standing beside me. Mom? What's going on? Who's this? This is Raymond Turner, my attorney, I said calmly. We need to talk. All of us. Michael's face paled. This isn't necessary. If it's about your things, we can arrange. It's about much more than my things, Michael. Please ask Stephanie to join us. Reluctantly, Michael led us to the living room and called for Stephanie. She appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel, her expression hardening when she saw me. Eleanor, we didn't expect you. We're quite busy today. Make time, I said simply, taking a seat on the sofa without waiting for an invitation. Raymond sat beside me, opening his briefcase. Once we were all seated, Raymond took control of the conversation. Mr. and Mrs. Wilson, I'm representing Eleanor in a matter concerning this property. Are you aware that Eleanor is the legal majority owner of this house? Stephanie laughed dismissively. That's ridiculous. We've been making the mortgage payments for 15 years. Nevertheless, Raymond continued unfazed, Eleanor owns 75% of this property according to the deed, which was never modified after the initial purchase when she co-signed the mortgage and provided the full down payment. He placed the property records on the coffee table. Michael leaned forward to examine them, his expression transitioning from disbelief to shock. This must be a mistake, he muttered. No mistake, Raymond replied. Additionally, we've documented $150,000 in direct contributions Eleanor has made to this property over the years, including the recent $50,000 that was represented to be for a home addition that was never constructed. Stephanie's face flushed with anger. So what? You're here to evict us from our own home? Is that it? I finally spoke, keeping my voice level.
No, Stephanie.
I'm here because I was told there wasn't room for me in a house that I legally own the majority of and have invested heavily in. I'm here because my son encouraged me to sell my home of 40 years, promising me a place in his family, only to discard me when I became inconvenient. Michael's face crumpled. Mom, it wasn't like that. We just thought you'd be happier in a community with people your own age. Don't lie to me, Michael, I said sharply. I overheard Stephanie talking about converting my room into a home gym. I saw the brochures for retirement homes that would drain my savings within a few years. This wasn't about my happiness. It was about my money and getting me out of the way. The room fell silent except for Stephanie's agitated breathing. Emily appeared in the doorway, drawn by the tension, but Michael waved her back upstairs. Raymond cleared his throat. We're here to present two options. Option 1. You buy Eleanor out at fair market value for her 75% ownership, plus her additional documented investments. Based on the current value of the property, that would come to approximately $475,000. Stephanie gasped. That's insane. We don't have that kind of money. Option 2, Raymond continued as if she hadn't spoken. Eleanor exercises her rights as majority owner to make decisions about this property, including who lives here. The implication hung in the air. Michael looked shell-shocked. You wouldn't put us out on the street, he said, looking at me. Your own grandchildren? The manipulation was so transparent it almost made me laugh. No, Michael, I wouldn't. Unlike you, I don't believe in making family members homeless. But I would expect to live in my own property without being made to feel like an unwelcome intruder. Stephanie stood up, trembling with rage. This is extortion. You're trying to steal our home because you're bitter and lonely.
No, Stephania, he replied calmly.
I'm asserting my legal rights to property I own and have significantly invested in. Property I was told I had to leave because there wasn't room for me. Michael put his head in his hands. What do you want, Mom? Just tell us what you want. I want what's legally mine, I said simply. Either fair compensation for my ownership and investments, or acknowledgement of my right to live in this house. A right that doesn't depend on your convenience or Stephanie's tolerance. Raymond handed Michael a document. This outlines both options in detail, including documentation of Eleanor's ownership and contributions. You have 48 hours to decide which option you prefer. 48 hours? Stephanie exclaimed. That's impossible. We need to consult our own lawyer. By all means, Raymond said, standing. I've included all relevant documentation. Any competent attorney will confirm Eleanor's legal position. I stood as well, feeling lighter than I had in months. I'll expect your decision by Monday morning. As we walked to the door, Michael followed us. Mom, please. Can't we talk about this? There must be some compromise. I turned to face my son, the boy I had raised, the man who had betrayed me. I've been compromising since the day I moved in, Michael. I've tolerated being marginalized, criticized, and ultimately rejected in a home that is legally more mine than yours. There's no more room for compromise. As Raymond and I walked to his car, I heard Stephanie's raised voice from inside the house. I didn't look back. You did well in there, Raymond said as we drove away. How do you feel? Sad, I admitted. Sad that it came to this. But also free. For the first time since Frank died, I feel like I'm standing on solid ground. Back at Martha's condo, I told her everything that had happened. She hugged me fiercely. I'm so proud of you, Eleanor. You stood up for yourself when it would have been easier to just disappear into that retirement home and let them have their way. It's not over yet, I cautioned. They still have to make their decision. Over the next 48 hours, my phone rang constantly with calls from Michael, which I directed to Raymond. Stephanie's mother called to berate me for destroying her daughter's family, and even Michael's father-in-law, whom I'd met only twice, called to try to negotiate. I maintained my boundaries, referring them all to Raymond. This wasn't a family disagreement to be resolved with emotional manipulation. It was a legal matter with clear documentation. On Monday morning, Raymond called with an update. They can't secure financing to buy you out, he reported. The bank won't approve a second mortgage of that size given their current debt-to-income ratio. So they've chosen option 2? I asked. Not exactly. They're still trying to negotiate a lower buyout amount. I've explained that the documentation is clear and non-negotiable. When do we meet again? I've scheduled a meeting at my office for tomorrow at 10. They've agreed to attend with their attorney. The meeting the next day was tense but productive. Michael and Stephanie arrived with a young attorney who looked uncomfortable as Raymond methodically presented the documentation of my ownership and investments. After a brief private consultation with their lawyer, Michael and Stephanie conceded that they couldn't dispute the legal facts. We can't afford to buy you out, Michael admitted. And we can't afford to move right now. The kids are settled in their schools and the housing market is tight. So what do you propose? I asked, maintaining the composure I'd worked so hard to achieve. After another whispered consultation with their attorney, Michael looked up. Would you consider allowing us to stay if we formally acknowledge your right to live here too? We could convert the downstairs study into a proper bedroom for you, with its own entrance. I exchanged glances with Raymond, who gave a slight nod indicating the offer was reasonable from a legal perspective. I'll consider it, I said, but only with written acknowledgement of my ownership and role in this household. No more treating me like an unwelcome guest or a burden to be tolerated. The agreement we eventually reached was comprehensive. My ownership would be formally acknowledged in writing. The study would be converted into a proper bedroom suite for me at their expense. I would have equal say in household decisions, and my financial contributions would be properly documented moving forward. Most importantly, there would be family counseling to address the broken trust and establish healthier communication. As we all signed the agreement, I felt no triumph, only relief that a resolution had been reached. This wasn't about winning. It was about justice and recognition. Before we left, I asked for a moment alone with Michael. When the others had stepped out, I looked my son in the eye. I love you, Michael. That never changed, even when you hurt me deeply. But love doesn't mean allowing yourself to be mistreated. I hope someday you understand that I did this not just for myself, but for you too, to teach you that how we treat people, especially family, has consequences. Michael couldn't meet my gaze.
I'm sorry, Mom.
I really am. I let Stephanie's feelings override everything else, including what I knew was right. We have a lot of healing to do, I said, not quite ready to accept his apology. But we'll start by being honest with each other. No more manipulation, no more half-truths. He nodded, and for the first time since this ordeal began, I felt a glimmer of hope that our relationship might eventually recover. Moving back into the house, my house, as I now firmly thought of it, was awkward at first. Stephanie avoided me, speaking only when absolutely necessary. Michael oscillated between excessive politeness and obvious guilt. The grandchildren were confused by the sudden change in family dynamics. The conversion of the study into my bedroom suite took 3 weeks. During that time, I stayed with Martha, visiting daily to oversee the work and spend time with Emily and Jacob. The contractor installed a private entrance, a full bathroom, and even a small kitchenette so I could have independence when I wanted it. When I finally moved in, I brought only what would fit comfortably in my new space. The rest of my belongings remained in storage, a safety net I wasn't yet ready to give up. Our first family counseling session was tense. The therapist, Dr. Bennett, had experience with elder issues and family conflicts. She created a safe space for everyone to express their feelings. I felt invisible, I explained during that first session, like my presence was tolerated only as long as I remained useful and unobtrusive. Stephanie struggled to articulate her perspective without sounding selfish. I felt like our privacy was invaded, like we couldn't just be a normal family anymore. Michael admitted feeling torn between loyalty to his wife and duty to his mother. I handled it terribly, he confessed. I tried to please everyone and ended up hurting the person who has always been there for me. The grandchildren's reactions varied. Emily, at 16, was old enough to understand the complexity of the situation. I didn't know Grandma owned part of our house, she said during a family discussion. That changes things. Jacob, at 14, was more direct. Mom was mean to Grandma, he stated bluntly, causing Stephanie to flinch. I heard you talking to Aunt Lisa about converting Grandma's room into a gym. These painful truths, once exposed, began the slow process of healing. Dr. Bennett guided us through weekly sessions, helping establish new boundaries and expectations. Stephanie's mother, Diane, complicated matters by repeatedly calling me a manipulative old woman who was destroying her daughter's marriage. Eventually, I had to block her number, though I encouraged Stephanie to maintain her relationship with her mother without involving me. Michael's father-in-law, Gerald, took a different approach after the dust settled. He called me privately to apologize for his initial reaction. I only heard Stephanie's side, he admitted. Now that I understand what really happened, I'm ashamed I didn't speak up sooner about how they were treating you. 2 months after moving back in, Raymond helped me establish a formal trust for my assets, with specific provisions for the house. If anything happened to me, my 75% ownership would transfer to Michael, but with legally binding conditions. The house couldn't be sold without setting aside funds for Emily and Jacob's college education, a protection against Stephanie's spending habits that Michael privately admitted was necessary. As spring turned to summer, small signs of improvement appeared in our family dynamic. Stephanie began including me in meal planning. Michael made time for weekly breakfasts with me at a local cafe, just the two of us. The grandchildren, once they understood I wasn't going anywhere, relaxed back into natural relationships with me. One evening, as I was tending to the small garden I'd planted outside my private entrance, Stephanie approached hesitantly. The tomatoes look good, she commented, standing at a careful distance. They'll be ready to harvest next week, I replied. Jacob loves fresh tomato sandwiches. A moment of awkward silence passed before Stephanie spoke again. Eleanor, I need to apologize. Not because Michael or the therapist thinks I should, but because I was wrong. The way I treated you was inexcusable. I straightened up from my gardening, studying her face for sincerity. Why now, Stephanie? She sighed. My friend Darlene's mother had a stroke last month. She's only 65 younger than you. Darlene had to move her into their home because they can't afford full-time care. It made me realize that could be my future too. How I treat my mother-in-law might be how my daughter-in-law treats me someday. It wasn't the most altruistic motivation for kindness, but it was honest. And honesty was what we needed to rebuild. We don't have to be best friends, I said. But we do need to respect each other. This is my home too, Stephanie. Not because of legal documents, but because family creates home together. She nodded, and though we didn't hug or make dramatic declarations of affection, something shifted that evening. A door that had been firmly closed cracked open just enough to let in possibility. 6 months after the confrontation, our family wasn't perfect, but we were functional. The legal agreement ensured my rights were protected. The therapy helped us communicate more honestly, and time was slowly healing the wounds of betrayal. The greatest joy came from rebuilding my relationship with my grandchildren. Emily began asking me for advice about college applications, and Jacob often did his homework in my suite, claiming it was quieter than upstairs. These moments of normal family life were precious after so much conflict. Michael continued to struggle with guilt, sometimes overcompensating with excessive attention, other times avoiding me when the shame became too much. During one of our breakfast meetings, I finally addressed it directly. You need to forgive yourself, Michael, I told him. I've forgiven you. Continuing to punish yourself doesn't help anyone. How can you forgive me? He asked, his voice breaking. I was going to send you away. My own mother. Because holding on to anger hurts me more than it hurts you, I said. And because despite everything, you're still my son. The boy who made me Mother's Day cards with macaroni and glitter. The teenager who mowed Mrs. Patterson's lawn for free after her husband died. The man who sat by my bed for 3 days when I had pneumonia after your father died. That person is still in there, Michael. He just lost his way for a while. Tears slid down his cheeks unchecked. I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you, Mom. I don't want that, I said firmly. I want us to move forward, not look backward. Build something new instead of trying to repair what was broken. As we paid the bill and walked to the car, Michael hugged me spontaneously, the first natural, unforced embrace since this ordeal began. Felt like the first real step toward healing. Stephanie and I would never have the close relationship I'd once hoped for, but we developed a respectful coexistence. She no longer attempted to marginalize me, and I made efforts to support her relationship with the children without overstepping. The house that had once felt like a battleground slowly transformed back into a home. Not the home I'd shared with Frank for 40 years, nothing could replace that. But a new kind of home, built on hard-won wisdom and genuine acceptance, rather than false promises and hidden agendas. And in that process I discovered something unexpected. My own strength. At 68, I had stood up for myself when it would have been easier to fade away. I had asserted my rights when others tried to dismiss them. I had fought for justice not just for myself, but for the principle that age doesn't diminish a person's right to dignity and respect. That realization was perhaps the most valuable outcome of this painful journey. It's been a year since I stood in Michael and Stephanie's living room with Raymond by my side, reclaiming my rights and my dignity. So much has changed in these 12 months. Some things for the better, some still works in progress. My suite in the house has become truly mine, decorated with treasured photos and mementos from my life with Frank. I've established routines that give me independence while still being part of the family. I cook dinner for everyone on Tuesdays and Thursdays, joining them for meals on other days when I choose to. The legal aspects have been fully settled. My ownership is formally documented, my financial contributions properly recorded, and my trust established to protect my assets and ensure they benefit my grandchildren as intended. Raymond still checks in periodically, both as my attorney and now as a friend. My relationship with Michael has slowly healed, though the scar remains. We talk more openly now, without the barriers of resentment and guilt that once stood between us. Last month, he surprised me by finding and restoring Frank's old workbench, which I'd sold when I moved. Seeing that piece of my husband return to me brought tears to my eyes. It was perhaps the most thoughtful thing Michael has ever done. Stephanie and I maintain a cordial relationship. We'll never be close, but we've learned to appreciate each other's strengths. She's an excellent interior designer, and when I wanted to redecorate my suite, I genuinely valued her input. She seemed touched that I asked for her professional opinion, a small moment of connection in our complicated relationship. The grandchildren have been the greatest blessing. Emily is preparing for college next year, applying to schools with strong journalism programs. She often asks about my life at her age, curious about how things have changed and what remains the same. Jacob has discovered a love for woodworking, something that connects him to the grandfather he barely remembers. I've shared Frank's old project books with him, and watching him create with his hands brings me profound joy. Martha remains my dearest friend, the person who stood by me at my lowest point. We meet weekly for lunch or shopping, and she never fails to ask directly, "Are they treating you right over there?" Her fierce loyalty continues to be a source of strength. My brother Robert visits more frequently now, staying in my suite when he comes. Our shared experience of aging has brought us closer, and his perspective as someone outside the immediate situation has been invaluable. Beyond my family, I've rebuilt my social life. I volunteer at the local library twice a week, join a walking group on Monday mornings, and have even started dating. Nothing serious, just occasional companionship with a kind widower named Thomas who lost his wife around the same time I lost Frank. The journey hasn't been easy. There are still difficult days when old hurts resurface. Days when Stephanie is curt or Michael seems distant. Days when I miss Frank so acutely that nothing else matters. But these moments no longer define my life. They're just part of it. What I've learned through this experience could fill volumes, but some lessons stand out above the rest. First, love and legal protection are not mutually exclusive. I loved my son enough to help him purchase his home, but I should have protected myself with proper documentation from the beginning. Assuming family will do the right thing without clear agreements can lead to heartbreak. Second, our worth doesn't diminish with age. At 68, I'm not just a grandmother or a widow or an elderly parent. I'm a woman with rights, opinions, and value. Being older doesn't mean I should accept being sidelined or silenced. Third, standing up for yourself isn't selfish. It's necessary. When I asserted my legal rights, I wasn't just fighting for myself. I was establishing that boundaries matter, that commitments should be honored, and that relationships must be built on mutual respect. Fourth, forgiveness is a process, not a moment. I've forgiven Michael and Stephanie, but that doesn't mean forgetting what happened or allowing it to happen again. True forgiveness includes establishing healthy boundaries to prevent future harm. Finally, it's never too late to rebuild. At an age when many people believe life's major chapters are closing, I've opened new ones. New friendships, new activities, new understanding of myself and my capabilities. If you're watching this and facing similar challenges with family, remember, you have value, you have rights, and you deserve respect regardless of your age. Document financial arrangements clearly, even with family. Keep copies of important papers. And if necessary, don't be afraid to seek legal counsel to protect yourself. I'm not bitter about what happened. In fact, in an unexpected way, I'm grateful. Without this painful experience, I might never have discovered my own strength. I might have continued to shrink myself to accommodate others' comfort. I might have accepted being diminished simply because I'm older. Instead, I stand tall in my truth. I occupy my rightful space, both in this house and in this family. And at 69, I look forward to the years ahead with confidence rather than fear. What about you? Have you ever had to stand up for yourself against family? How did you handle it? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Sometimes knowing we're not alone in our struggles is the first step toward finding our voice. Thank you for listening to my story. May you find the courage to claim your own worth, whatever your age or circumstances. Remember, it's never too late to begin again.